Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining or watching this presentation. My name is Matt Massar, and today we are going to be talking about the convergence of gambling and gaming, how it's impacting our youth, and what interventions can be used by clinicians, parents, teachers, to best help individuals who may be experiencing trouble with gaming. So a little bit about myself. I am a licensed social worker. I am also an internationally certified to treat gambling disorder as well as gaming disorder. There are two, as you'll see in this presentation, two very different but very similar addictions that can kind of overlap quite a bit. And I see that a lot in my clinical work, especially with younger demographics. I'm really eager to share my insights and practical strategies with you today. So I'm a clinician at the Better Institute, which is a private practice group out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So for the objectives for today, so whenever I'm writing up the objectives of a presentation that I'm giving, I always want to think of, what can the participants or attendees take home with them and talk about at the dinner table, share what they learned, and almost give the presentation for me with their friends and family. And so I came up with a couple really great objectives for today's presentation. So first and foremost, we're going to define what the convergence of gaming and gambling looks like. Then we're going to review research, literature findings for both gaming and gambling, and as well as the convergence of it. We're then going to evaluate different screenings and assessments that are available for gaming disorder that you can implement in clinical practice, and maybe talk about a little bit of the shortcomings when it comes to available screenings and assessments. Then we're going to dive into what we call the parenting triangle, or also the inverted parenting triangle, as it applies to discipline for parents and teens. And then we'll wrap everything up talking about involvement strategies that parents can use as it relates to their teens or youth gaming and gambling behaviors. So let's go ahead and get into it. So starting off with the convergence of gambling and gaming. This is the newest convergence, if you will, to become clinically aware of. I need to stress that today's gaming has multiple opportunities for gambling just built right into it. So some of these intersections include the monetization of video games, betting, wagering, mechanics, skill versus luck, all of which we're going to get into today. So first off, we're going to start bare bones, the definition of gambling. So gambling involves risking something of value to gain something of greater value with an uncertain outcome. So right here on the screen, it's not a real image. It's more of a cartoon version of it. But this is, the classic example of gambling. You put money in, hope for a larger payout, but the outcome is based on chance. So this is an older version of a slot machine. And I point that out because we will later in a couple slides kind of talk about how slot machines have changed, and a bunch of gambling machines, I should say, have changed to kind of take a more of like a gaming perspective almost, this gamification of slot machines. So here you have, the old classic crank lever, stuff like that, lights go off. So I want to keep this image of a slot machine in mind, and we'll reference back to it in a couple slides. So we got the definition of gaming. So gaming is the behavior, action, or practice of engaging in video game playing that involves skills and in exchange for completion of a task to gain a virtual reward. So these rewards can stay within the game, or increasingly we're starting to see these rewards have real world value. And this is where, again, the lines between gaming and gambling can start to blur a bit. All right, so here is our trusty friend, the DSM-5. I think it's important to understand what the DSM has to say about both gambling and gaming. So gambling disorder is located in the substance-related and addictive disorders chapter. However, gaming disorder is not officially diagnosable. In the DSM-5, it's not actually included. Well, it is. It's closely related to internet gaming disorder, which is included in section 3 of the DSM-5 as a condition of further study. So it is located technically in the DSM-5, but again, requiring further study. So it's not currently diagnosable with a DSM-5 criteria. There are some criteria listed in there, but again, not an official diagnosis according to the DSM-5. However, the World Health Organization officially recognizes gaming disorder. Again, internet gaming disorder is how they classify it in their 11th revision of the International Classification of Diseases. So the ICD-11 does include gaming disorder among its diagnoses. So let's kind of take a look at what the specific criteria are for both gambling disorder as well as internet gaming disorder as the DSM-5 lists it. So for gambling disorder in the DSM-5, I don't need to read through all of these, but some of the more common diagnoses that we'll see, and maybe you'll see also overlap with gambling: preoccupation, withdrawal. This disorder is really characterized by a persistent and maladaptive pattern of gambling behavior, thus leading to significant impairment or distress in other aspects of one's life. In order to meet a diagnosis for gambling disorder, you must meet 4 of the following 9 criteria, and it cannot be better explained by a manic episode. So I want to pause on this slide really quick because the image here on the screen, we can kind of reference back to that old slot machine image that I had a couple slides prior. And we can see in this slot machine what's different. Think about what's different in this one. Maybe it looks a lot flashier, I'd say, a lot more high tech. It almost looks like a video game. And that is the trend we're starting to see, is casinos trying to target a different demographic, a younger demographic. And to do that, what is the younger demographic more interested in? They're more interested in video games. And so the casinos and gambling industry are adapting to this and starting to make more and more video game-like gambling mechanisms or gambling machines. And so this slot machine one, again, almost looks like you're playing a video game at this point. Again, we'll probably reference back to that, but just wanted to point it out while that image was up here on the slide. So then looking at gaming disorder. So again, gaming disorder, not an official diagnosis in the DSM-5, but it does still list the criteria for it, again, for further study. So again, we see preoccupation, withdrawal, loss of other interests, deception with gaming, using games as an escape. So for this one, a diagnosis requires meeting 5 or more of these criteria, and the symptoms must cause, again, significant impairment in either social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. Importantly, the symptoms should not be better explained by another mental disorder. So the ICD criteria is composed of 3 different things. So the ICD-11 criteria is actually composed of impaired control over gaming, increasing priority given to gaming, and continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. So the ICD-11, a little bit different, obviously not too much different, but that's how they would their criteria for meeting a internet gaming disorder diagnosis. But again, these are the DSM-5 that you see on the screen here in the further to be studied section. So what I really want to highlight here is the overlap that we see between gaming and gambling disorder. So we both see similarities in preoccupation, withdrawal, tolerance. Again, I don't need to go through all of these, but it's important to highlight I don't think it's necessarily shocking to see such overlap in diagnostic criteria between these 2 behavioral addictions, but I think it's important to highlight such an overlap between them. So now let's get more into the kind of convergence of gambling and gaming. So this term, gamblification, is a term used to describe really just to describe that convergence of gambling and gaming. And we see it in a couple different ways. So gamification is the practice of intentionally introducing gambling or gambling related content or mechanics into contexts where it's not typically present. And for our sake of our conversation today, it's introducing it into gaming. And so the goal of gamification is to influence or encourage certain behaviors. So we're going to talk now about kind of how monetization fits into this picture. So modern video games often incorporate various methods to generate revenue, and some of these mechanics can create a gambling-like experience, even in games that aren't traditionally considered gambling. So you'd be hard pressed at this point to find any type of video game that does not have some form of gambling mechanic, whether it be, a Call of Duty game, FIFA, which is for soccer, or just, the run-of-the-mill iPhone app that you have, Candy Crush or whatever it may be. They all are starting to have some sort of gamification, some sort of gambling related content or mechanic that are involved in their gameplay. And we'll kind of get into some examples of that. Some examples I'll list here are things such as in-game purchases, loot boxes, or just other systems that really encourage the individual to spend real money for virtual items. It's really important to understand how these elements work as they, again, contribute to that blurring of lines between gambling and gaming, especially for vulnerable individuals. So let's dive into a little bit of the specifics of monetization and gamification. So the first and honestly biggest one in the gaming industry is these loot boxes. So if anyone's not familiar with what a loot box is an in-game purchase consisting of a virtual container or item that rewards a player with certain items or modifications based on, again, chance or adjusted probabilities. Sounds fairly familiar. It's designed to provide repeated cycles of uncertainty, anticipation, and feedback. Again, sounds pretty familiar to something we were just discussing or something we saw in a previous slide. Designed to be part of a compulsion loop of game design, keeps players coming back. Again, fairly similar. And, again, what I'm hinting at is it sounds very much like a slot machine mechanic. There was actually a recent lawsuit, not so recent anymore, by parents, I believe, up in Canada, that was filed against the makers of the video game Fortnite, blaming the addictiveness of their game design, primarily because of these loot boxes, and various gambling related mechanics that were involved in their game that were intentionally put in there to, again, increase the addictiveness of their video game. So with the loot boxes, my next slide is going to show you what it actually looks like, what a loot box opening looks like. So this is in the game CSGO. Just one video game out there that has a loot box. So here you go. You're opening a little box and then spin, spin, spin. Oh, what weapon are we going to get? Oh, we want a, super rare item. And that again, triggers a nice little dopamine rush for the individual. But what does this, mechanic look like? This spinning wheel here of items to win. I think it looks pretty similar to stuff we've seen in the past. Oh, my slide won't come up. Oh, I have on this slide was supposed to be, a little, let's see if it'll come up. No, a roulette wheel or a slot machine mechanic. So again, very similar, almost identical, to what a slot machine win looks like, what maybe even a roulette wheel spin would look like. And again, this isn't just, specific for this one video game. You will see this mechanic come up and up over and over again, in various video games out there. Now let's explore social casino games. So these games are often found on social media platforms. So more often than not, you'll see these on Facebook primarily. And they simulate gambling activities like slot, poker, blackjack. And there is a very social influence aspect to it. More and more like games, so they're progressively becoming more similar to video games, but it's still gambling. So again, on the screen here is this really interesting article about this game called Coin Master, which I can chat a little bit about. But we see this transition from casino, like a generic slot machine. And then we start to see, again, a little bit more gamification, and then fully into the video games. But this Coin Master game, again, is still a casino. So social casinos are, according to this article that I have listed up on the screen here, Game Refinery, social casino category is the third largest by revenue in the App Store. So depending on the week, if you go into the App Store on your phone and go to the games, and kind of see that like top 10 list, you'll often see probably 3, 4, maybe even more, spots being held by social casino games in that top 10 of most downloaded, gaming apps on the phone. So these social casinos, they typically use virtual currency, which can sometimes or more often be purchased with real money, but they can't be cashed out. So we can put real money into these games, but we can't take that money back out. However, just because it's virtual currency, don't let that fool you. The psychological and behavioral effects of these games can still closely mirror those of real money gambling. So it doesn't matter that I'm just, gambling virtual currency. It still, simulates that same effect. The bright lights, the exciting sounds, the thrill of winning, even with virtual coins, can be highly engaging and potentially addictive. So it's important to recognize that these social casino games can be a significant gateway to real money gambling, especially, again, for those vulnerable individuals, whether it's a young individual with impulse control issues. It's important for clinicians to be aware of the risks of these exist out there. They're free to download most of the time. And so just being able to have these conversations and educate those you're working with, whether it be a client, a student, a child of your own, just being able to educate them on the potential dangers of seemingly harmless games. So that's social casinos. And then last one we have is this kind of debate or not even debate, sorry, this skill versus luck aspect. And more so this taking a closer look at in-game purchases. So this screenshot taken here is from a game called Best Fiends. That is not a typo. It is Best Fiends, without the R. And in this game, you play these mini games, that yield jackpots where the user, receives a valued commodity that in turn helps them to move forward in the game. So it helps you move forward in the game, and we often translate that as skill. It's something I'm doing, to progress, and I'm achieving things, but also there's this whole luck aspect to it. And these purchases, these in-game purchases, can range from purely cosmetic items like a character's skin or accessories, to functional upgrades that actually enhance the gameplay, such as powerful weapons, additional lives, whatever it may be for that specific game. Again, while seemingly harmless, these in-game purchases can become problematic very quickly. The ease of making these purchases, often with just a few quick clicks, can lead to, unintended financial consequences. So again, just another, gamblification aspect of games. So you've probably heard me say gamblification and gamification. So again, they're not interchangeable. So the gamification we often see, actually, it might be on this next slide. I can tell you a little bit better about. So this would be the gamification of gambling, in which the gambling we're introducing more gaming aspects to it, whereas what we were just exploring were video game aspects that were getting introduced or influenced by gambling. So all of these, again, are examples of that convergence between gambling and gaming and how the lines are starting to really, truly blur, putting younger individuals at higher risk of exposure. So as I mentioned earlier with that one newer slot machine, this is another way in which the gambling industry is trying to get younger and younger demographics. Maybe Pac-Man's not for younger and younger demographics anymore, but introducing that gamification and really making it seem more fun. Oh, this is gaming related. A younger individual see Pac-Man or maybe, another game and being advertised in this format and say, oh, I like Pac-Man. I want to give that a shot. And introducing that. So again, thinking back to that one slot machine, it looks like a video game because again, these casinos are trying to find ways to get younger and younger individuals, younger demographics interested in gambling. They've obviously struck gold with sports betting, but this is just another way to try and lure in that younger demographic. So this is just, main considerations again about the convergence of gambling and gaming. Both involve repetitive actions. Both can be compulsive, or can become compulsive, I should say. They're both behavioral addictions. Motivations are similar, some different, depending on, real money involved, the reason we play video games, the reason we gamble. So motivations can be different, but there are a lot of similarities. Risk of exposure of them, the psychological game design that is really involved in both of them, but we are seeing it really play out much, much more in games. That games are being purposefully designed to be addictive. So let's now dive into what the current research is saying, and more specifically what it's saying about screenings and assessments for gaming disorder. So for this one, all right. So just some general or basic stats to help illustrate that we need to expect of our children, clients, and friends who may be experiencing problems with gaming. But these are just some basic stats across the board. So over 2.5 billion people play video games. 73% of Americans age 2 and older play video games. So every time I do this presentation live, there's always a little bit of a gasp when I say ages 2, because yes, we are starting younger and younger. People are, or parents maybe, are using iPads, screens, devices, almost in a babysitter-like role. And so we are seeing a younger and younger age start to play video games. But interestingly enough, I don't have the statistic on this slide, but I always like to have people guess what the average age of a gamer is. Typical responses I got actually at the in-person NASW presentation was 10, 15, 16, 9 years old. The average age is actually 34 for male and 34 for females, 32 for males. That's the average age of a gamer. We're not looking at just teenagers either. This is, that millennial group who grew up with gaming. They're still gaming. It's not something that typically grow out of. Maybe you play video games less, but it's not something you completely abandon. So it's interesting to take into account when we consider what a gamer actually looks like. It's, much older than we might anticipate. So but going back to the younger demographic, so 90% of teens play video games on a computer, game console, so PlayStation, Xbox, or on their cell phone. And then we see that over 92% of teen boys have access to a gaming console, so that whether that's a computer, PlayStation, Xbox, and 41 are very honest and say they spend too much time playing video games. So that's self-reported right there, which I think is a very interesting statistic in and of itself. So while video games are, they're a common pastime, and you'll never hear me preach that video games are awful in any means. I think they're wonderful and have great benefits for teens and any individual, honestly. When done in balance. So again, that's the biggest thing. So many struggle with finding this healthy balance between video games, school, chores, extracurriculars, work, whatever it may be. That's the only, when we run into issues with video games. I think they're great, but we have to have a healthy balance for them. And parents often struggle with knowing how to best manage their team's gaming. And so we'll get into, a couple of helpful tips down the line here of how parents, clinicians, prevention specialists can really help to kind of manage their team's gaming, or just be better educated to have conversations about it. So this research article is awesome, and unlike most research papers out there, this one is completely accessible via Google Scholar. So I'd highly recommend checking it out, but I'll give a little summary of it. So in case you're not really interested in reading the research article in full, I can give you the basic summary here. So in this article, the question the researchers sought out to find, or to answer, is how do we screen and assess for gaming disorder, and what tools are out there? So let's break it down in terms of the highlights we got going on in the article. So there are numerous tools for gaming disorder out there. And so this study evaluated 32 of these gaming disorder tools, and they're evidence-based from 320 empirical studies. So what they found were that several instruments had greater evidential support than others, but no single tool emerged as the clearly optimal choice. And that's honestly the biggest takeaway. A standard international tool to screen and assess for gaming disorder would be invaluable to advance this field of gaming disorder. And I want to take a second here to say that, as a field of study, if you will, the field of gaming disorder, we're relatively early on in the gaming disorder space of kind of understanding the wide ranging impacts of it. So while I say we're fairly early on, we can still fall very quickly behind in terms of how to manage it and the best ways to approach prevention, identify high-risk individuals, at-risk individuals, and really understand how gaming disorder comes to be. So that is why it's so crucial to find a tool to screen and assess for gaming disorder. So there's a lot, first off, going on this screen, and so I apologize for that, but I think it's a really important table to look at. So this is a table taken from that research study, and it shows all of the 32 assessments that they were looking at, or screening tools that they were looking at, I should say. So that is what we're seeing here, and then on the top, we're seeing both the DSM-5 criteria as well as the ICD-11 criteria. That's what's in the blue box there. The things at the top that aren't in the blue box are just the impairments. But I wanted to focus on the DSM-5 and ICD-11 criteria. And so then what I have highlighted in orange are the tools that cover all of the DSM-5 and ICD-11 criteria. However, they still don't fully measure impairment in personal life, social, educational work, and financial aspects of an individual. So each one still misses on a certain measure. So there's, again, no full gold standard. Does not mean that these, we should just toss them away. No, there's some great ones here, and there's some that I actually use in my clinical practice. So does not mean there's nothing useful out there, just means that we could still benefit from a really true, tried and true gold measure tool. So conclusion from this paper that I want to hit on were, the inclusion of internet gaming disorder in the ICD-11 was a milestone in and of itself. Just having that recognized, I'm hoping that the DSM-5, or I guess DSM-6, will have that included, and that will be, the next step forward for this field. But the following tools I have listed here, they do really have relatively greater evidential support. And there's some that I actually use in my own clinical practice. So, I'll have you, if you're interested more in these, you can obviously feel free to look them up. The Lemons IGD-9, I think, is a really great one that I will use every now and then when working with a client, when we're working on problematic gaming. But again, no gold standard out there. So this is another great research article that reviews that explores the emergence of problem gambling in young people. So from childhood to emerging adulthood, which they classify as up to 25 years of age. And this one focuses on how activities with gambling-like features, such as video games featuring loot boxes or social casino games, as well as new forms of gambling, such as online sports betting, online esports betting, which is something we could get into, contribute to problem gambling. So what they found in this study are some really great things. Well, really interesting things, I should say. So, what they found here were 4 studies indicated that more frequent video game playing was associated with at-risk or problem gambling. They found that 6 studies indicated greater severity with problem gaming was associated with problem gambling. So again, we're seeing this convergence, this relation between problem gambling and problem gaming. And then with college/university age students and young adults, there were 2 studies that found that problem gaming was associated with problematic gambling. Again, as especially obviously there's younger individuals can find access to gambling, but as we're seeing that kind of 18 plus, that college age, really start to have legal access to gambling, there's a lot more convergence that we are seeing in that clinical population. Some other really interesting findings from the article regarding children and in-app purchases. So some research suggests that those who have more in-app purchases may have an increase later in gambling. So the more money spent in apps, whether on translating into virtual currency, still could potentially lead to increase in later gambling. They found that embedded casino games can glamorize gambling for the youth. Winning with tokens rather than real money, still simulated gambling. Going back to the social casinos that we talked about earlier, defined as games, again, with that core simulation of gambling activities. So ultimately, the review highlights that early exposure to gambling-like features in games and new forms of gambling can contribute to problem gambling in young individuals. It also underscores the role of individual psychological factors in this process. So again, a really great research article that truly shows that convergence of gambling and gaming in that clinical space. This is just a chart that I thought was really interesting from the article. And this one talks about just early exposure, the social influence part of it, and then, whether a certain mechanic or aspect of a video game could be a potential gateway for gambling. So just, again, really interesting stuff there. So now that we understand the link and the convergence and the blurred lines between gambling and gaming, what do we do about it? So we're going to talk now about some ways clinicians, parents, teachers, prevention specialists can really begin to target potentially unhealthy gaming behaviors. So really it's screening, diagnosing, and treating. This is no different than screening for a gambling disorder. A small sliver, so that red piece of the pie chart there, a small percentage are the ones presenting with a primary or presenting issue of gaming disorder. It's often masked as something else. So whether it's trouble in school, discipline issues. So we really want our providers to be very competent in their referrals, their resources, and understanding that just because a client's coming in for something that doesn't seem to be gaming related does not mean that gaming is not an issue. But we're very hyper-focused on the group that comes in that is their presenting issue, but that only makes up a small percentage of this population. Parental involvement is also very important. And in what way is parental involvement important? By being curious, by trying to understand more about their child, the teen, or maybe a client they're working with, understanding their gaming. So this is one of the big takeaways from the second half of this presentation that I really want you all watching to think about. So I want you to think about your perspective on video games, and I want to maybe potentially change that perspective of, maybe if we go in with this preconceived notion of video games are are evil or they have no good, they're rotten our brains. That can kind of really create a wall or a block between working with a client or understanding your team's gaming. So I want you to get curious with your clients, get curious with your kids about their gaming. Don't necessarily look for a problem, but look for an opportunity to have a conversation with them. And so instead of focusing on that sliver of bread that are presenting with gaming disorder, let's really focus on the broader population of those who may still be experiencing unhealthy relationships, problematic relationships with gaming, but is not presenting as the first issue or the primary issue. So again, inquiring and being curious, having the conversation, holding a positive perspective. Again, I often have parents who do have a negative outlook on their child's gaming because it's gotten to a problematic point or an unhealthy balance. And so they do have this negative perspective. And so it's very tough for them to have these healthy conversations with their kids because they don't have a very positive perspective on gaming. So they don't really want to have those conversations with their kids. But what I do see in clinical work is kids really do open up and engage when we have an open and honest perspective when it comes to gaming. And that's why I think it's so important to include parents in the prevention aspect, at risk, and even in my clinical work. I think having the parents involved is so important. And again, my biggest emphasis is always going to be on healthy gaming, on responsible gaming, on finding that healthy balance. And so just one more research study to throw out to you. This one I thought was really great. And it was done examining gaming, during the lockdown from the pandemic. So this research is really helpful in understanding more about children and their parents, as it relates to gaming and gaming disorder. There's so much in this article. I'm only going to focus on a few aspects that do a good job of supporting the, emphasis on changing our perspective, change in focus. So in this article, it analyzed video game habits of children and adolescents. So it analyzed the type of game, device use, time of day gaming, and it also focused on a couple variables related to parents. So the knowledge of their children's lives, monitoring their video gaming habits, and the parents' own use of video games. And then it looked at how these related to time spent on video games and gaming disorder symptoms. And what it found was some really neat stuff. So they found that gaming disorder symptoms were significantly and positively related to parents' time dedicated to gaming and their children's gaming. In layman's terms, parents who game more have children that game more. And I see this all the time, especially now that more and more millennials are becoming parents. Heck, even some Gen Zs are probably becoming parents now. And I see this a lot more is parents are gaming a lot. And so they have kids who game a lot, but the parents don't see anything wrong with their gaming. And so really what we're doing is modeling maybe not the best relationship with gaming and not having the healthiest perspective there. The research article also found that significant and negative correlations were found between gaming disorder symptoms, parental gaming monitoring, and parental knowledge of the child's life. Again, in short, parental involvement works. Parents being involved, understanding their child's lives, monitoring their gaming in terms of understanding how much time they're spending on video games, what video games they're playing, is really beneficial to managing gaming disorder symptoms here. So that's about it for the research. Now with the research in mind, what do we actually do with it? So let's again talk about some views about gaming. So we want to really explore your perspective on video games and technology because your perspective matters. How you go about having these conversations genuinely does matter. And so I want you to take some time, think about what your views are on the pros and cons of video games and technology. I want you to explore, any countertransference that you feel about video games, about individuals who play video games. Maybe we do have some, preconceived notions of what a gamer is and what, that looks like. And maybe they're more negative preconceived notions. And so we want to really determine how to work through those countertransferences because again, your perspective matters. I can't say it enough. But I really ask that everyone, kind of think about what their views on video games are, and again, the pros and cons they see of that, and technology as well. We can throw that in there. So let's talk about parents and discipline. So after you understand if you have any countertransference, then we move to better understanding parents, how they discipline. Think about how many parents complain about video games and use it as, the stick instead of the carrot. So we use it more as a way of discipline rather than a way of motivation. So this is the parenting triangle, which was a concept developed by my colleague and co-creator of the Powered Up courses, which I'll get to in a little bit, but Jody Bechtold, as well as Dr. Alyssa Wilson. So think of this triangle essentially in units of time, effort, and focus. So at the very top, you might not be able to make that out, but we've got rewards. In the middle, we have planned ignoring, and the bottom, we have limit setting. So essentially, this is how we see the effort of a parent being used. So a lot of time is spent on limit setting. We're constantly correcting things, setting limits on video games, whatever it may be. Middle part, planned ignoring. Maybe we're ignoring some actions a little bit, but what we often see is at the very top is a limited amount of rewards, a little bit of praise being offered by parents, but not a ton. And so we want to explore this concept as it relates to parents' discipline style and video games. So we're going to kind of take a closer look at what I mean here. So again, with rewards, what we're talking about is providing preferred activities and items non-contingently. We often see that reward/praise is infrequent or variable amongst parents. It's not very consistent. Planned ignoring, often absent in parenting, maybe a mix of ignoring of the behavior with ignoring the child. But again, limit setting is where we see parents spending so much of their time, whether that's being focused on punishments, taking away privileges, often a daily occurrence, regardless of the child's behavior, just because we've become so ingrained in, that focus. So what we kind of, came up with was, or I guess Jody and Alyssa came up with, and I've, commandeered their idea and share it with everyone, is we kind of flip this on its head and essentially invert the pyramid. This is what we want to do as part of our intervention when working with teens, is to spend way more time on rewards. We want parents to really focus more on rewards, while also, again, being very clear about limits, but really focusing on that praise aspect. This is, classic behavior theory at work right here. So when we expand the rewards and praise, we're now providing, again, preferred activities, but we're doing it as often as possible. We're really trying to, offer praise and positive feedback, wherever possible. Planned ignoring, we're sticking with that to kind of age appropriate junk behaviors, if you will, with low risk. So low risk behaviors being, a roll of the eyes when you ask them to do homework, or they, grab your phone to play games while you're driving. Those are some things that can be kind of planned ignored. They're low risk behaviors. And, reserved for behaviors that are okay, to allow trial and error with consequences. But then we're shrinking down limit setting. We're not completely eliminating. I'm not saying, let the kid run wild without consequence. But limit setting, and taking away privileges are really reserved for high risk behaviors only. And so what I like to do in sessions when working with parents is have them almost fill this out, have them identify, what are the high risk behaviors that really require limit setting. Where can I reward and praise my child more? Help them really to complete this triangle, have them fill this out, and then monitor and reassess. The goal here is to help parents, help their teens have a healthier relationship with gaming, and also give the parents a little bit more peace of mind because they're not having to constantly limit set, which is, again, can burn out from that in and of itself. So this is our course, or courses, I should say. that we've developed. So we've developed these two self-paced on-demand courses for both parents and, as we call them, players, the teens or young individuals. Together, these courses teach healthy gaming, as well as helping parents improve their understanding of video games, understanding discipline styles, and also just being able to be more involved in their child's gaming. And so how we're going to conclude this presentation is kind of going through some content from the course to help you through some of these concepts on what we mean when we talk about discipline, style, involvement, and all that stuff. So these are directly taken from our Powered Up courses. If you scan those QR codes, it'll take you to the course and you can take a look and see what you think. So, basic understanding of types of gamers. So this is kind of where we start with parents. We really want them to understand their child's gaming, what they're doing, why they play video games, their motivation. So we have these three different categories, which I won't spend too much time getting into, but the escaper, long and short, is, an individual who plays video games to escape from their day-to-day life. Maybe they find that they're not doing as well in school as they like to, or just have struggles in school, but they don't struggle in video games. They're actually able to, find success in video games. And so they use it as an escape from, their shortcomings in the real world. The achiever is for the individual who really does like to achieve, likes to level up, likes to improve competitiveness, that kind of thing. And the hardcore classification is kind of the combination of the escaper and the achiever. And it's important for both parents and players to know what type of gamer they are, and just provides more insight and can help have better conversations. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but this is just, I love this one, types of video games. So a lot of parents just don't know what types of video games are out there. They know, have heard of certain video games, but they don't actually know what they mean. So like when I say, what's a MMO game, what's a MOBA game, no idea. I get blank stares. And so this is a really great way to break it down and kind of understand what your child's playing. And the next slide is actually my ultimate favorite slide in the presentation. I love this picture. It really speaks to the overlap of games and stresses the importance of having the conversation with your client or child about what they like to play. So this is just an overlay or Venn diagrams of different genres of video games and the overlap that exists among them, and some examples of video games that fall into each of those genres. But this is always a great way to kind of get a better understanding of your child or client's gaming and to have better conversations with them about what they're actually interested in playing. And then we also, dive into some reasons and motivations that individuals play games. So they enjoy the novelty, exploration. There's ways to build relationships. Again, notice the curious conversation style here. Again, we want parents and clinicians to really understand their teen or client's gaming. Some more here. Again, you'll see gambling as one of those reasons that individuals might game, as well as income and career. That's a whole nother presentation that I could give. But that is an aspiration of some individuals, is, developing an income or career based on video games. These are some reasons that we find individuals tend to gravitate towards video games, and just important for parents and clinicians to explore. And then we dive into some good conversations that parents can have with their teens about gaming. Again, helping parents to get curious and remove the negative. Teens will get excited when their parents ask questions and want to learn. I could tell you countless clinical anecdotes that I have of, me just recommending a parent go ask their child what their favorite video game is or who their favorite streamer is. And they come back the next week and they're like, they wouldn't stop talking about it. They loved having that conversation. And again, you'll get some normal pushback from that age group, but we have found that this is a way to actively get teens, whether it's a client or just your own child, more involved in that conversation. Again, remember, no judgment. We want to go in with an open mindset here. So in the course, we have conversation ideas, some examples that we can suggest for you to practice out or try out with your kids, do you like most about video games? What are you most proud of in your game and why? Some other ones about, video-based conversations. So YouTube, Netflix, streaming stuff. What's your favorite video and why? What are you watching recently? Who's your favorite streamer and why? Again, covers more than just games because it's all connected. Gaming and streaming and TV, YouTube, all that stuff is connected. It's not just video games. This is my favorite slide. I think it's a little bit wonky on the screen here. But when we talk about gaming with your child, games have evolved, obviously, since, some individuals, older individuals, maybe not older, started playing. So again, Pac-Man I have on here, which I think was 1980. And then on the other side of the screen, you have Overwatch, which came out, I think, in 2016. So there's a lot more speed, a lot more complexity, to these games, and that can put parents off from wanting to get involved with their child's gaming. But I still encourage parents to try it. There are games out there that are not as complex and, overwhelming as this one you see on the screen here. But just getting involved in their gaming, having, family video game nights instead of family board game nights is a really great way to go about it. But this is, one thing that can cause some hesitation for parents is just they feel out of their depth just talking about it, but also playing it. But we can't understand unless we actually get involved. But, so yeah, Overwatch 2016 there. So another thing to check in on are just parents and things to do. So similar things that we've already hit on today, modeling positive behavior, healthy screen use, 5 to 10 minute warnings when transitioning away from games. Again, all this located in our Powered Up Parent course. And this essentially is a basic checklist to help parents learn how to incorporate, again, going back to that inverted triangle, really how to incorporate those rewards and that discipline style. Things not to do, again, good to know. Again, don't demonize video games or screens. Don't use it to regulate emotion, but also don't allow unlimited access. We still want to have, guardrails, limit setting when it comes to it, not just free reign. Then we get into some, again, classic behavior theory. We need to help parents understand what positive and negative reinforcement does. So we really focus on, a 5-to-1 praise to correction, thinking back to the inverted parenting triangle, really highlighting that or really emphasizing the rewards and minimizing the limit setting for those high risk behaviors. So 5 praises to 1 correction is a great way to think about it. If it's helpful to think about it as deposits versus withdrawals, again, that 5-to-1 is a nice ratio to have. Again, just referencing back to the parenting triangle here. Lastly, I think the most bare bones advice that I can give the parents and clinicians, these 3 things: be involved, trust your gut and intuition, and give yourself some grace. It's a tough job being a parent, not going to do everything right. You're not expected to. Maybe you expect that of yourself, but we want to understand that you got to give yourself some grace sometimes. It's not always going to be perfect. And we know you're trying your best out there. Lastly, I'll leave you with this. Obviously, we don't have time to get into this today, but for those of you who don't know what you're seeing in this picture, you might think, oh, am I watching, WWE event or some kind of sports event? No, this is an esports event. Esports is competitive gaming. So just like you would go to watch a football game, a soccer game, a basketball game, people are selling out arenas to go watch video games. I know, sounds crazy, but it is the future. This is the next frontier, for that convergence of gambling and gaming. And that's kind of it's not even the next frontier. It's already here. Because like you can sports bet on a football game, on a basketball game, you can also sports bet on an esports event. So again, this could be a whole other presentation to give, but this is, that next frontier here for the convergence of gambling and gaming, and it really does center around esports. So just to summarize what we learned today, so there's an existing and growing convergence between gambling and gaming, and we really want our focus to be on positive conversations when it comes to gaming. It's important to provide support using effective strategies with parents, really exploring their perspectives on gambling and gaming, understanding the parenting triangle as it relates to discipline, and developing new ways based on the inverted parenting triangle, and helping, again, parents spend time and be involved in their teens' gaming, have those healthy conversations and interactions. I know, obviously, virtual recording, not too many ways to take questions here. So here is, again, our self-paced course, if anybody wants to check that out. And then here is my contact information. Please feel free to shoot me an email whenever, give me a call, shoot me a text message. I'm always happy to chat. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to do that as well. But thank you so much for sitting through this presentation. It was really great getting to talk about. And please do not hesitate to reach out if you'd like to follow up or have any questions. Thanks.